Welcome to Mysteries of Time. Today we diving into a surprising story, how a land ignored for so long on the edge of the Atlantic became the richest and most powerful nation in history. In this video, we'll trace the dramatic rise of the United States of America from a continent of uncertainty to a global superpower, uncovering the decisions, the luck, the conflicts, and the vision that made it all happen. Stick around, because what you'll learn will challenge what you thought you knew about America's journey to number one. Let's begin with a question. Why did the rest of the world for more than a century almost ignore what we now call North America? And how did that neglect become the foundation of an extraordinary rise? Imagine stepping off a ship into an unknown land, full of dense forests, wide rivers, and powerful native nations. Your mission wasn't to build a country, but simply to find a shortcut to Asia. That's how the story of America begins, but the shortcut never showed up. Instead, a continent did, and from that moment, the world's balance of power began to shift. Back before the famous voyages, the map looked very different. Many Europeans didn't recognize North America as a vast new landmass. The famous explorer Christopher Columbus sailed west in 1492, thinking he'd find a quick trade route to the riches of Asia. Instead, he landed in the Caribbean islands. He called the native peoples Indians because he truly believed he reached the outskirts of India. It's a mistake that stuck for centuries. Soon after, Spain and Portugal, the two great naval powers of the day, literally drew a line across the world map. This was the Treaty of Tordesillas. It said everything on one side of the line goes to Portugal, and everything on the other side goes to Spain. It was an incredibly bold move. But what's really interesting is where they focused their attention. Spain rushed into the Caribbean, Central, and South America. Drawn by the incredible allure of gold and silver, and they found it in staggering quantities. But North America, especially the more temperate regions we know today, seemed less immediately valuable. Spain's expeditions into what is now Florida and the southeastern U.S. didn't yield vast riches. So for decades, much of North America remained largely ignored by the major European powers. Meanwhile, the English started making their own attempts. The first try, the Roanoke colony in 1585, vanished mysteriously, becoming America's first great unsolved mystery. But they tried again, and the successful settlement of Jamestown in Virginia was founded in 6007. Not long after, the Pilgrims landed further north in Plymouth, seeking not gold but religious freedom and a new life. Before long, a string of 13 distinct British colonies stretched all the way down the east coast. But they weren't alone. The French were quietly claiming the vast interior of North America. This territory, known as New France, was enormous, reaching from the mouth of the Mississippi River up through the Great Lakes and deep into modern-day Canada. While Britain had colonists, France had traders and trappers, building a different kind of empire based on fur and alliances with Native American tribes. Then in the mid-late 18th century, all this simmering tension boiled over into a global conflict. In America, it was called the French and Indian War. Britain's colonies had over 1 million people, far more than France. But the French had strong alliances with many Native American nations who saw the British colonists as a greater threat to their lands. After years of brutal fighting, the British ultimately won. They forced France to give up Canada and its vast territorial claims east of the Mississippi. This was a major turning point. Britain was now the dominant European power in North America. But with great power came great problems. Britain had fought huge, expensive wars in America and across Europe, and was now deeply in debt. To raise money, they looked to their American colonies. Parliament began imposing new taxes on everything from sugar to paper, all without giving the colonists any representation in the government that was taxing them. No taxation without representation became the explosive rallying cry. This dispute over taxes and rights escalated quickly, leading to protests, boycotts, and eventually the American Revolutionary War. On July 4th, 1776, the colonies declared their independence from Britain a bold and dangerous gamble. Winning that independence, however, didn't immediately guarantee success. The 13 former colonies became in essence 13 small independent states, loosely joined together. The first government they set up under the Articles of Confederation was weak and ineffective. It couldn't raise taxes, couldn't field a proper army, and couldn't solve disputes between the states. The young nation was on the verge of collapse. Recognizing the danger, the Founding Fathers gathered again, this time to write the new U.S. Constitution. They created a stronger federal system with a president, a Congress, and a Supreme Court, forging a unified national government from 13 separate entities. In 1789, the hero of the Revolution, George Washington, became the first president of the United States. At this point, the United States was still a modest country confined to the eastern seaboard, but in the early 1800s, things began to change at a breathtaking pace. This era was defined by two powerful themes: explosive territorial expansion and massive population growth. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson made a deal that would change America forever. In the Louisiana Purchase, the U.S. bought a gigantic swath of land from France, literally doubling the size of the country overnight for pennies an acre. This purchase fueled a powerful idea called manifest destiny, the belief that the nation was divinely destined to spread all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And spread it did. The U.S. bought Florida from Spain in 1819 after Texas won its independence from Mexico and was annexed by the U.S. in 1845. A conflict erupted into the Mexican-American War. The American victory resulted in the U.S. gaining vast western lands, including California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. Around the same time, the Oregon Treaty with Britain in 1846 secured the Pacific Northwest. In less than 50 years, the U.S. had become a continental nation. As the frontier moved west, the population exploded. American families were large, birth rates were high, and waves of settlers migrated west in search of land and opportunity. This rapid growth created a massive internal market and a huge base for future economic power. But while the United States expanded in land and population, a profound and poisonous issue raged just beneath the surface: slavery. The country was dividing into two very different societies. In the North, slavery had been or was being abolished, and a new industrial economy was booming, powered by factories, railroads, steel, and oil. The South, however, remained largely agrarian. Its economy and entire way of life heavily dependent on the labor of millions of enslaved African Americans. The tension over slavery's expansion into the new Western territories finally exploded when Abraham Lincoln, who opposed the spread of slavery, was elected president in 1860. Fearing their way of life was under threat, 11 Southern states seceded from the Union and formed the Confederacy. This triggered the American Civil War. The war lasted for brutal years from 1861 to 1865. It was the deadliest conflict in American history, tearing families and the nation apart. In the end, the North won. The United States was held together and slavery was abolished, but the trauma and consequences were immense. Hundreds of thousands were dead. The South was left in ruins, and the nation faced the monumental task of reconstruction, trying to heal its wounds and define the meaning of freedom for millions of newly liberated people. After the war, the United States entered a period of unprecedented industrial growth. The Transcontinental Railroad was completed, connecting the east and west coasts and opening up the vast interior of the country. Steel mills lit up the skies of Pittsburgh, and entrepreneurs like Carnegie and Rockefeller built massive empires in steel and oil. By the late 19th century, the United States was no longer just a sprawling agricultural nation. It was rapidly becoming the world's leading manufacturing power, setting the stage for its emergence as a global superpower in the century to come. From a forgotten coastline to a continental powerhouse, the journey was forged in conflict, ambition, and a relentless drive westward. Until now, the U.S. had mostly focused on continental growth. But as the 19th century drew to a close, America's gaze began to shift outward toward the wider world. The year 1898 was a major turning point. The Spanish-American War wasn't just a brief conflict. It was a declaration of new intentions. With a swift victory over a fading European empire, the U.S. suddenly found itself in control of overseas territories: the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. That same year, it annexed Hawaii. The United States was no longer just a continental nation. It was becoming an empire with a global reach. To support this new global presence, America needed to project its power. The answer was sea power. Inspired by strategists like Alfred the Mahan, leaders understood that controlling the oceans meant controlling trade and influencing global events. But there was a problem: the vast distance around South America to connect its growing naval and commercial fleets between the Atlantic and Pacific. The U.S. undertook one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history: the Panama Canal, completed in 1914. This marvel of engineering sliced through the continent, effectively giving the United States a two-ocean navy and a massive commercial advantage. This combination of overseas territories and naval mobility was a game changer. America was no longer just reacting to world events. It was starting to shape them. This new strategy of sea power, trade, and a global presence set the stage for the century to come. Then came the World Wars. While World War I saw the U.S. emerge as a significant player, it was World War II that cemented its status. While other major powers were devastated by years of conflict on their home soil, the United States, protected by vast oceans, became the arsenal of democracy. Its industrial might exploded, its economy boomed, and its military grew to an unmatched size and technological level. By the time the war ended in 1945, the Old World Order was in ruins. Britain's empire was crumbling, and Europe was exhausted and divided. Into this power vacuum stepped the United States. With the world's largest economy, an unrivaled military, and a leading role in creating new global institutions like the United Nations and the World Bank, America's position was undeniable. It had transformed from a regional player into the world's preeminent superpower. But this didn't happen by accident. So let's step back and unpack the key ingredients that fueled this incredible rise. What were the fundamental building blocks of American power? First and foremost, geography and resources. The North American continent was a treasure trove of vast, fertile lands, dense forests, and an incredible abundance of minerals like coal, iron, and later oil. Navigable rivers provided natural highways for commerce long before railroads crisscrossed the nation. This raw natural wealth was the foundation upon which everything else was built. You simply can't build a global power without the resources to fuel its industries and feed its people. Next, you need people. From its earliest days, America was a magnet for immigrants. Millions upon millions flocked to its shores seeking opportunity and fleeing hardship. This constant influx of people provided two crucial things: a massive labor force to work the farms and factories, and a steady stream of new ideas, skills, and entrepreneurial energy. This high immigration, combined with a naturally growing population, created a dynamic, ever-expanding society that was constantly innovating and pushing boundaries. This human capital was just as important as the natural resources buried in the ground. Of course, resources and people are only potential. You need a way to unlock that potential. For America, the key was industrialization and technological leadership. The 19th and early 20th century saw an explosion of American invention. From the cotton gin and the telegraph to the telephone, the electric light bulb and the assembly line, American innovation revolutionized not just the country, but the world. This technological edge allowed the U.S. to build industries that were more efficient and productive than any other, creating immense wealth and further cementing its economic dominance. Let's not forget the sheer space. Territorial expansion from the Louisiana Purchase to the acquisition of lands from Mexico gave the United States immense strategic depth. It wasn't just about more land for farming and settlement. This vast territory provided a buffer from foreign threats and allowed the country to develop with a degree of security that few other nations enjoyed. Protected by two massive oceans, the U.S. could focus on its internal development for much of its history, largely avoiding the constant conflicts that plagued Europe. This strategic advantage was a quiet but powerful factor in its rise. But perhaps the most powerful ingredient, the one that ties it all together, was a strong belief system. The ideals of liberty, democracy, individual rights, and free enterprise, though not always perfectly applied, formed a powerful ideology. This American dream, the idea that anyone could achieve success through hard work, attracted talent from all over the world and unleashed the creative and economic potential of its own citizens. This shared belief system created a dynamic, ambitious, and resilient nation capable of overcoming immense challenges from a civil war to economic depressions. So when you put it all together, you see the full picture. The rise of the United States wasn't just a result of one single factor. It was a unique convergence of vast natural resources, a growing and diverse population, technological genius, massive territorial scale, a powerful belief system, and a savvy foreign policy that used its geographic isolation to its advantage. What began as a collection of land seen as a backwater by the old powers of Europe transformed over decades of exploration, expansion, conflict, and ambition into one of the most powerful nations in history. As we look at this incredible story, it leaves us with some big questions for today. Has the United States reached a point where there is nowhere left to expand, geographically or economically in the 21st century? A world of digital networks and global challenges? What does power even mean? Is it military might, economic influence, cultural appeal, or technological leadership? And as new powers rise and the world changes, how will America's story continue to evolve? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the rise of America, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the past. Over on the right, you'll find our next video, and I promise you won't want to miss it. I've also left some helpful links and notes for you in the description below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you in the next chapter of Mysteries of Time.